Good evening. I go by the Creation King, and today I thought I'd try something a bit different. As you may know, it's Pride Month, and generally I try to do something for Pride Month, be that add new content to some of the prefabs that I sell, or make some addition to one of my maps. But the entire beginning of this month, I've been really busy, and so I didn't actually get to do anything in a timely manner. So instead I decided that I should make a system that can remember to do these things for me, which is why today we're making an event calendar system. The first thing we need to do is plan out what we need. Obviously we want it to work for Pride Month since that's the original goal, but let's make it work for things like Halloween, and even Christmas. Now, while I personally like Pride Month and Halloween lasting a month, I hate that Christmas lasts so long. I hate Holly Jolly, as you can tell by the anger and rage in my voice. So instead of having it last for the full month, like in Pride Month and Halloween going for 30 and 31 days, let's have it only last, say, 7 days, rather than the full 31 of December. What this means is that our system is going to not only need to be able to detect what month it is, but also whether the date is within two specific numbers. So rather than just saying whether it's June or October, it will need to specifically know that it's between June 1st and June 30th. My first thought process was, once the world starts up, I would check to see whether the current time and day is related to a vector 2. The vector 2 would be like an XY coordinate, but instead of using coordinates, I would just put the month and day in there. I would realize that it would actually not be able to keep a range within that vector 2 though, so later I would change it out for something else. The idea was that for every event that I saved in this list, I would check to see whether the day that it is now is within that range of time. I realized, however, that a vector 2 just doesn't have enough numbers in that to actually be able to be used, because while I could say the month and day, for example June 1st, I could not say the end of that day without having another separate list. So I decided to instead go for a string, which is text-based information. While I would have to manually convert it into an integer later, which is a number, I could just separate the beginning range by the end range with a dash. This node splits the text into two separate halves on either side of this dash. To give a better visual example, I went back and added these comments to show what's going on. In event 1, or the first event that I have saved, I have the text 6/1-6/30. This node then separated that into the two separate text 6/1 and 6/30. The last part of this process is then pretty obvious. We just repeat the process we did with the dash, except instead of using the dash, we use the slash. This then gets us the separated numbers 6, 1, and 6, and 30. We can then use this to compare whether we are within the range of those two dates. Now that we finally have our numbers, we can get to the actual comparing to see whether we're actually within that range. The first part, which was getting the month, was actually fairly easy. I just need to convert the text of the first month and the text of the second month into proper numbers that I can use with calculations. I then find out whether the current month is within those two numbers by using this little logic gate here. The next part actually had me stumble for a bit. At first I thought it'd be similar to the month, but then I realized there's a problem. If an event lasts between 2 months, for example it starts on June 20th and ends on July 10th, you could actually get a day that is smaller than the first number, but still fits within the range. I tried finding a node that would work for this before I realized I could just do a bit more calculations. If instead of thinking of the current day as being within two numbers, I instead treat it as two separate calculations, I can think of it this way. Is the current day higher than the starting date? I can do that a bit easier. If the current month is higher than the starting month, I already know that it's going to be past the beginning date. I can then also add the same thing for the ending month and say, hey, I know that the current day is before the ending day because it's an entire month before. The last thing that I would need to do before implementing the actual events was make it so if no event actually activates, we enabled something by default. To do this, I would just use a bool that activates if any of the events successfully activate. If none of the events activate, it's left off by default. which I can then check over here to enable the default object. The last thing to do is just to add an array that has the same amount of entries as there are entries of events. So every event has a game object that it can enable, and also just to make the default object. With the script finished, I can just go and add it to an object and set up a default object, an event object, and type in the dates that it's going to be enabled for. On hitting play, everything should work on the first try. And as we can see here, everything is ideal. After testing my script, I went back and added the next two events, and until it actually reaches those dates, I have no clue whether or not it'll actually work. If this video gave you any help on your own coding ventures for your own worlds, let me know in the comments below. If you think I should package this as a prefab, or if you have any ideas for other projects that I should try out, also let me know in the comments below. I make prefabs for VRChat and generally post about them here. If that interests you, subscribe. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Fairly well.